My first syndication absolutely terrified me. I was full of doubt that I could even get it done, but I was very excited at the same time. I'll tell you all about it. My name is Darwin German. Over the last 30 years, I've been an owner, a manager, and/or a broker of more than $500 million of properties in 4 states, over 8,000 units, over 1,200 homes, and millions of square feet of commercial and multifamily properties. My goal here is to teach you what it takes to become a successful real estate investor, from being a passive investor to a large syndicator. With 30 years experience, I have hundreds of stories to illustrate what it takes to be successful. You will learn from my challenges and my successes through real life experience. I completed my first syndication in 2008, just before the market crash. At that time, I already had $1 million real estate education, all from hard knocks that spanned 19 years. I had managed over 5,000 apartment units, and I was the broker when we sold that portfolio, which had a price tag over $200 million. I completely reorganized our property management company and rewrote the entire policy and procedure manual. And in 1 year alone, dropped $1 million off our expenses. That raised the value of that portfolio by $12 million in 1 year. Completing a syndication takes many steps and many people. Hopefully you followed the instructions from the previous podcast and have already started to prepare. Remember, you should have a real estate attorney, SEC attorney, management company, contractors, due diligence company, a commercial real estate lender to submit the property to, and a good start on your investor list. Just to give you an idea of the steps involved. Number 1, find a property that works for you. This is only done after market analysis, touring and analyzing properties, and meeting a lot of people. Number 2, engage the lender early, even before you submit a letter of intent. Your lender is your biggest partner. You want to make sure you know how much your partner is going to contribute. I typically send my mortgage broker my analysis, which means my pro forma. They want to know, how will I operate the property when I own it? What will my expenses look like? How much rehab is needed? Where are those rehab dollars going? How are they going to be used? Are they going to be used on backsplashes in the kitchen? New countertops? New vinyl plank floors? New fixtures? What all is needed for that property? The lender wants to know what rehab items will give you higher rents. To come up with this, I usually call a third-party property management firm to help me with producing the pro forma on the future rents. They typically know what inventory of apartments are in the area and what they lease for. The third-party management companies have invaluable knowledge on the markets. Leverage their brain power. Again, get your lenders backing this deal before you submit an LOI to the listing agent. I submit to the lender the offering memorandum from the listing agent, the T12 operating statement on a monthly basis, never consolidated, an updated rent roll. What I need from the lender is loan product options and what loan amount we can get. This is called sizing the loan. Sizing basically means, what will the lender loan on the property? It all comes down to the main question. Can they really get this loan closed? If you can, make sure you have an in-depth conversation with the lender. Disclose everything. Have an honest and upfront conversation with them. This is a very important decision because you are riding this horse all the way to the finish line. You will probably not be able to switch horses in the middle of the race. So choose wisely, my friend. Now, the lender will require a good faith deposit, non-refundable, of course, and they'll order third-party reports, which include an appraisal, environmental, property condition report, and whatever else they need to paper up their loan. Number 3, put the property under contract. First, you put in an offer as a letter of intent. Then, if you agree on terms with the seller, a purchase contract is prepared. You need to review that contract with an attorney and understand everything in it. Then the rubber meets the road. You write the check and put up the earnest money. Now the real fun starts. You need to do many things concurrently. And we're off. The race begins. Number 4, start due diligence. This includes an inspection of every unit, reviewing the lease files, reviewing financial statements. getting an engineering report, and much more. Create your buying entity. Your attorney will create this for you. This is another check you will write. There are pros and cons to all the different types of entities. Learn what those are. Even choosing the entity name can sometimes be a challenge. Number 6, prepare a private placement memorandum. We call those a PPM for short. You will have your SEC attorney prepare that document, which could be 160 pages or more and cost you a lot of money to prepare. Do not skimp here. This is the lawyer and the document that keeps you out of jail. The PPM discloses everything you know about the property and the transaction. It also provides the operating agreement that will govern your entity. And number 7, start raising money. You need the capital to buy the property, and this comes from investors as well as yourself. You are already writing many checks up to this point, and without the investors, you could lose it all. By it all, I mean more than just the cash you put into the transaction. You have your reputation with the seller, your reputation with the brokers, and your reputation with the lender all at stake. Do what you say you will do. As you can see, you already have brokers, transaction attorney, SEC attorney, management company, inspection company, contractors, lender, and hopefully soon, investors. This is the start of your team. As you can see, there are many different facets of a transaction that require many different skill sets. No one is expected to be an expert at all of them. Now, we have a bunch of people on our team, very, very talented people. Who is on yours? Let me tell you about my first full-time team member. His name is Brian Johnson. This guy is super talented, and I'm very blessed to have him on the team. Brian was a practicing attorney in Wisconsin and wanted to change. Yes, he is a real attorney, but he wanted to shift his focus into real estate personally and professionally. Years ago, I placed an advertisement to hire an assistant. You can see everything a sponsor needs to do. You need people to help you. And when I posted the ad, I accidentally posted it in a listing in the legal section, and Brian actually replied. I made him an offer immediately, not as an assistant. And I was surprised that he accepted. He moved to Texas and has been the man behind the scenes handling every detail ever since. Brian was perfect. He plugged the holes in my weaker areas, mainly organization and legal details. My father always taught me that knowing your weaknesses is one of your greatest strengths. Well, I know my weaknesses. Organization was the first concern. Since I was out on properties, I was meeting with people, and I was basically on the go. I needed somebody behind the scenes to keep track of everything. Brian is brilliant and has been the perfect fit. He handles all legal, transaction, and communication. Over the next podcast, I'll introduce you to other members of the team, what they do, and why. My main point in telling you about Brian is to have you identify your strengths and weaknesses, and then hire people that are better than you in those areas. Now, let me tell you about my very first deal as a syndicator, 100 units in Saginaw, Texas. But first, a few housekeeping points. Number 1, we do not sell education or mentoring. There are many companies out there that can sell you this information. I'm familiar with most of them, and you can learn from them all. Never stop learning. Number 2, I provide free education so that I can attract more passive partners. We make our money on real estate, not on education and mentoring. Number 3, we have free monthly meetings, free road trips, and also record all the meetings so that we can send them out. If you are interested, just check us out at darwingerman.com. And number 4, we have a team. I do not, nor could I, handle everything as well as I could alone. This is a team effort. It's the team that deserves credit for the success we have had. Now for my adventures in our first syndication. In the past, buying groups that I worked with were rich. They had the money and I did the work. I represented them in the purchase and the sale, and I had the management company to oversee the operations and provided asset management. Again, that's the way it was done 25 to 30 years ago. It was one rich guy, the general partner, and a few of his martini-drinking friends from the country club that invested. Ownership in large apartments was not for regular people like you or I. You had to have a big chip to get a seat in the game. That was back then. I learned about apartment syndication in 2008 from an education and mentoring group here in DFW. They opened my eyes to show me that I could use my skill set to raise money and buy larger properties. So I went out, I found a property through a broker in Saginaw, Texas. Now, Saginaw is a growing suburb in North Fort Worth. The property was 100 units built in 1970 and had a very interesting and very ironic backstory. Here's what I found. Initially, Saginaw Crossing Apartments was bought by an out-of-state syndicator. He raised money from investors in Oregon and tried to operate and manage the property from a distance. Quick note on that, that is a problem. You need to have local people looking at the asset. After a short time, the syndicator bailed on the transaction, which left the investors, those limited partners, to take over and take control. Now, they had very little experience, and they chose the wrong syndicator. When they took over, they then hired a local management company. The problem was that management company completely screwed them. Expenses were way out of whack. Spending was out of control, all on stupid things that did not add any value. The management company did not have skin in the game. They were taking a fee and milking the property. Here's the truly amazing part. They were funding the operations, the negative cash flow, out of their own pockets to a tune of $300,000. And they never spent $500 to fly out and see the asset for themselves. Can you believe that? Who would invest $300,000 and then not spend $500 to look at the property that they invested in? Also, the property had a lot of problems. Let me give you an idea of how out of control things were there. The city hated the owner. The tenants would call the city rather than the property manager to have work orders. The way that that's supposed to work is the residents would go into the office, fill out a service request, and then that would go over to the maintenance man who would go out and fix that item. In this case, the resident would call the manager and say they had a problem. The manager would say, come on in and fill out a service request. Well, they'd keep their lazy butt on the couch and instead call the city. That call would go to the main city switchboard, the same one that you would call to get a hold of the mayor or city council people. That switchboard would refer it over to the code compliance officer, who would take the call, find out what the problem is, and they would jump in their car, run out to the property, go in and meet with the resident, who would say, the property manager is not fixing this item, this leaking sink or whatever the problem is. So the code compliance officer would fill out a citation and run it down to the office and give it to the manager. And the manager said, that's all I really needed was a written service request. And this is the written service request. The property manager would go ahead and have that work done and take care of the resident. Well, anytime a resident called the manager to have a work order done, they didn't want to get up and go down and do that. They found it much easier to call the city. So the city was getting tons of phone calls from one property, one little 100-unit apartment property in that city, and that ran all up and down all of the leadership in Saginaw. Now, the city of Saginaw was upset. They thought that this was just a horrible, horrible property and a horrible owner. So they went so far as to get a court-ordered search warrant to go inspect every single apartment unit on the property. Now, this is extremely excessive, and I'd be willing to bet it has not happened to any other property owner. Now, the problem, that court-ordered search warrant, the city came out, they brought fire inspectors, they brought building inspectors, they brought code compliance. They also brought police officers to enforce this action. Now, in property management, as an owner, we cannot open a door to a resident's apartment without 24 hours notice. It's a requirement. We would get in trouble if we opened those doors. So the property management company could not open those doors and comply with that court-ordered search warrant. But the city was there to do it, and they were firm. They even threatened to arrest the property manager and arrest the owner for not complying with that. So, absolutely blows your mind how aggressive they can be. And this shows you how bad the relationship was between the city, the tenants, and the property manager and the owner. Now, back to the story. I wanted this deal. I negotiated a great deal and put up the earnest money. It was $50,000. That was a whole lot of money for me at the time. I would get a new loan and raise $1 million from investors. But how in the world would I find $1 million in capital? Unfortunately, right after I went under contract, the capital market started to slide and banks pulled back. This was in 2008, and the banks were starting to be afraid to lend on anything, especially a distressed asset. I had to come up with a solution. I negotiated a wrap. A wrap is when the seller will carry back the loan, but also keep the existing loan in place. Now, I could not do an assumption on the current loan, and I couldn't get new financing at the time, so this was the best alternative. Not very many lenders would allow you to do this, but we got it done. They did not want a foreclosure on their books at that time. We started due diligence and everything that involves, and I was still terrified. I was more worried about how to raise $1 million. I think this was a really ballsy move on my side. I committed to a deal with money I did not have at the time and without the investors lined up. This was scary. To get my mind wrapped around the problem, I broke it down. All I need is 10 people with $100,000 each. That sounded a whole lot easier than one person with $1 million. 10 simple, easy sales. 10 people with $100,000 to invest. I knew that if I found 10 people to invest in this property, that I would make them money, and in turn, I would make a lot of money as well. I started dialing for dollars. I called everybody I can think of, and I was shocked. There were a lot of people with $100,000 to invest, way more than I could even imagine. Of course, these were all people I knew. They knew my track record, and they trusted me. This was a huge advantage. Just think of the people that trust you. Family, friends, whoever. I managed that property starting at the beginning of the crash and rode it right through the drop in the market. Nonetheless, we owned the property for 55 months. The only reason we sold was that some of the partners wanted out. I tried to explain all the future upside. We needed to stay in the deal, but they wanted to sell. So we did. We sold that property and the partners made 15% per year average return, even through the most horrific real estate market crash in modern history. I saw there was still a lot of upside, and we put together another group to buy the property. Yes, I wanted to stay in the deal. Now, we call that recapitalization. We say goodbye to some partners and give them their money back with a good, solid return and bring new investors in. Today, we still own that property. The new group, for each $100,000 investor, has already received close to $200,000 cash back, and they still have an estimated $250,000 of equity in the property. Is that not unbelievable? The moral of the story: prepare as needed, have faith in your actions, have faith in your abilities, hire people to augment your weaknesses, and just start the process. Just take action. One final note. You get rich buying and selling real estate. You get wealthy buying and owning real estate. Thank you for joining me on this podcast. Again, my name is Darwin German. You can reach me at darwin@darwingerman.com. Now, go take action.